Up next, the development of effective, accountable, and transparent institutions. Meeting the Sustainable Development Goal 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions. Welcome, everyone. Angelica, the stage is yours.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very excited to welcome you to the very first World Higher Education Ranking Summit. And today we are joined by leaders in their field, changemakers, innovators, people that care about the issue of sustainability, implementation of the UN 17 Sustainable Development Goals into life, and human rights. Today's topic is crucial for the world in turbulent times like today. Development of effective, accountable, and transparent institutions meeting the Sustainable Development Goal 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions. And I'm very honored to welcome everyone here on this panel because we have real experts in the field right now that will be able to answer any of your questions if you submitted it to the chat box, and will be giving their excellent insights on meeting the SDG 16. So first of all, let me introduce our honorary panelists. Karina Gomez. Karina Gomez is the Executive Director of Local Change Hub, and she's an expert in local implementation of SDGs and human rights. With a master's degree in human rights, she applies human rights-based approaches to sustainable development-related projects, working in the UN agencies, city administrations, and international research centers. Karina is the member of the Local Pathway Fellowship 2022 cohort, UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network Youth, and she's co-author of the book, Implementing Human Rights and Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development at the Local Level, Key Issues and Examples. Welcome, Karina. Where are you joining us from?
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for the warm welcoming. I'm very happy to join this discussion, and I'm joining you today from Germany.
Excellent. Thank you, Karina. I also would like to introduce you to Christiane Kuniva. Her academic background in political science and human rights law is outstanding. She holds a master's degree in human rights from London School of Economics. Professionally, she's done policy and advocacy work for various international organizations and intergovernmental bodies, including UNICEF, Council of Europe, and the European Parliament. Her current goal is to explore in depth the intersection field between human rights protection and tech innovation. This is very interesting, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have to say, Christiana. Christiana, where are you joining us from?
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Angelica, for the wonderful introduction as well. I'm currently in the UK, so I'll be joining from here today.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Christiana. I would like to welcome to this panel another extraordinary panelist. His name is Ramon. Ramon is an independent accredited lobbyist at the European Parliament in Brussels and Strasbourg. Thereby, he is advocating, empowering, educating young professionals to become part of the EU policy and decision-making process in it for sustainable development, EU Green Deal, and digitalization. He's also a frequently asked public speaker. He's helping with digital skills, youth acquire digital skills and sustainable development. And he's been working within the Erasmus Plus exchange programs, helping students all across the world. Thank you so much, Roman. And please tell us more. Where are you joining us from?
Thank you so much for the warm welcome, Angelica. I'm joining from Latvia, Sokrasti, and I look forward to this panel.
Excellent. Thank you, Ramon. And Emily Schiff, I'm really honored to welcome Emily. Emily is a multi-passionate data scientist and data engineer with a background in immunology and neuro-oncology research. She has made it her life's work to empower others make strategic decisions to improve society with high-quality data initiatives. And recently, Emily has been working in parallel with the ICTD System Engineers and Risk Analysis and Preparedness Section, Office of Emergency Operations, teams at UNICEF to develop data pipelines that extract, transform, and load global event data from open media sources that is used to develop and forecast models relevant to conflict. This is absolutely amazing. Thank you so much, Emily. Where are you joining us today from?
Hi, good morning. I'm joining you from Mexico City this evening or this morning.
Wonderful. We have a very diverse and very extraordinary, I would say, panel today because everyone today that is present is an expert in their field and would be happy to share their insights, knowledge on peacekeeping, building actual mechanisms, how we can guarantee the implementation of the UN SDG number 16. And it's very interesting because, as you know, today we have our audience is mostly academics. So it's academics, members of faculty, deans, presidents of universities, and also we have a proportion of students joining WERS conference today. So my first question would be towards the SDG 16. So I know that everyone here is an expert in sustainable development. Could you please tell us why SDG 16 is fundamental, one of the most important goals to implement, and why it is so difficult to execute it?
Well, if I can answer that question from you, and yeah, for me, it's really important because in terms of the projects that I managed to do with, for example, Erasmus Plus with different universities, the ties between strong institutions for us is very important. Why? Because they host students and teachers as well. So, for example, Erasmus Plus project is focused on bridging the gap between those two, let's say, things, students and teachers. And peace is therefore needed to, as a fundamental thing, to bridge that gap in strong institutions. They need to be transparent in their topic as well. So I'm talking about from an academic point of view, what our organization is doing is organizing this topic in a way that it makes more sense for the student as well, because we work with youngsters. We first need to focus on what does peace mean to you. So in terms of a bottom-up perspective, let's say, from a more community point of view, we want to first teach the students on what peace means to them, and then create the stability for them to enable them to educate them in a better way. So from a bottom-up perspective, that's my opinion, to really have that first fundamental thing of what does peace really mean to that young person.
This is brilliant, Ramon. Thank you so much. This is very important for everyone to understand that nurturing the youth and helping them understand why it's important to implement the UN SDGs in life and how it's important to actually focus on peace building is crucial to have peaceful societies in the future. And I believe Karina would like to add something on this.
Surely, thank you. To talk about peace, justice, and strong institutions, it is crucial to understand the core message of Agenda 2030, which is leaving no one behind, and why it is the most prominent link between the development agenda and the human rights framework. I'm a UNESCO consultant and also, as you have mentioned, director of Local Change Hub. And I've been researching the interlinkages between sustainable development and human rights and practically translating the guidance provided by these global agendas and international commitments into implementation of programs and policies. And this practice has shown that the SDG framework defines development targets and indicators that measure development, but do not give specific information or guidance on respect, protection, or fulfillment of human rights, and do not address directly the dimensions of equality, equal opportunities, participation, equal treatment. So addressing anti-discrimination, inclusion, and accountability instruments is key to develop effective, transparent, and accountable institutions. So in the book, you mentioned implementing human rights and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development at the local level, which is co-authored by me and published by UNESCO. In this book, the researcher Marcus Muster and I, together with our series editors, we explore how to operationalize the human rights-based approach so as to effectively implement the sustainable development and human rights agendas. And then I can break this down into at least 3 core actions. That means putting people at the center and developing human rights-centered approaches that promote the well-being of every person and respect and protect their human rights. And that also entails identifying those left furthest behind. Also deliberately combating racism, discrimination, and prejudice, identifying existing practices that lead to exclusion, and incorporating considerations of race, disability, color, religious background, age, ethnic or national origin, sexual orientation, and so many others. Also promoting gender equality and diversity with specific diversity policies. And later during this discussion, I will be happy to bring this down to the university environment.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Karina. And I believe Christiana has a lot to say on this as well, as you've been studying this and working in the field.
Thank you, Angelica. So building up on what Karina and Ramon have said, I've been working in the section of children's rights for the past few years. So for me, it's really critical to address the issue of building up transparent and justice-prone institutions on an international level, because when it comes to protecting the rights and providing safety and providing for the well-being of such vulnerable communities as children or children from excluded groups are, it is very crucial to always take into account how important the building of such transparency institution is for the protection of those rights. Because when proceeding from the region that I've been working for, which is mostly in Eastern Europe, when it comes to dealing with institutions that provide for the safe placement and allocation of children that come from excluded groups or that suffer after family separation, it's very important to provide those children in conflict with the law. It's very important to provide those children with access to justice, and transparent institutions and peace building institutions are the primary place that we should turn to in order to secure their safety and well-being.
Thank you very much, Christiana. A very important insight. And to you, Emily.
Yeah, so as I was listening to everyone speak, so especially in the medical community, getting the information to the right person at the right time was always vital in terms of making a really important decision or intervention. And I think that perspective has really held true within the humanitarian environment. And so that's kind of why transparent institutions allow for the development of projects that allow us to get information to people faster. And so while I don't work directly on the side where directly with the people who work with children, I work directly with the people who use that information to set up those channels and to set up those dynamics and interventions that allow a place for children to be displaced safely if there's a war zone where they're from. So transparency within an institution is absolutely vital in terms of getting the information to the right people at the right time.
Actually, this is crucial, Emily, because right now, learning from my experience and working in the field in Ukraine with the people from the front line, the situation is the following: that access to information is very limited. And even though all these institutions, everyone, UN, UNICEF, UNESCO, are trying their best, still vulnerable do not have the access. What would you recommend, and this is the open floor here, what would you guys recommend to actually encourage and to get the information to the vulnerable groups? How can we do that? How we can promote this for people who do not speak English in the crisis regions, because there are many crisis regions where they do not speak English. And how do we promote this? How we promote the information to those areas that are quite far away, where there is no internet, let's say, that have very difficult facilities, very broken facilities, I would say. What is your opinion on that?
I'll at least start this one. It's a bit of a less technical answer, but from my experience working within UNICEF and other institutions, for lack of a better word, it's almost having fresh blood. It's allowing for new people to come into the institutions with new perspectives, and those perspectives to be valued and taken into account. Because when you have new, when you work on a new project, you get to know a new dynamic and a new team, you see things differently, and there's a new, fresh perspective. And I think that's something that is starting to happen within these institutions, but there's a lot of systematic, this is how we do things, methodologies that are happening internally. And if if there is the freedom and the flexibility for new perspectives and new implementations to be kind of taken seriously and applied very quickly, that would add a lot of, or that would reduce a lot of the friction that's with the data movement and information movement right now, just because you see somebody, you kind of can see what needs to be changed when you're a new person, versus if you're just deep within it, it's kind of hard to see the improvements, the small little improvements that can really make a vast difference.
Absolutely. And the change has to come from the inside, and leadership of organization is very responsible. It's mostly the leadership of organization that is responsible. However, as you say, fresh blood, fresh thoughts and outlooks on this can be hugely helpful to transform current ways, old school approaches, and make sure that there is new way to deal with conflict resolution. And my next question would be actually on institutions, because Goal 16 is not about only peacekeeping organizations. It's also about institutions, and it doesn't say directly higher education institutions, but let's assume that it is. What do you think is the importance here? Why higher education institutions must collaborate with peacekeeping initiatives, with organizations that focus on transparency, inclusivity, peace promotion? What do you think?
And I think Ramon can complement me as well. Institutions need to specifically implement SDG targets and indicators, doesn't matter what nature they have, what role they have, and always under a human rights-based approach. That means fulfilling the role of knowledge generation, educational activities, but also developing tools, programs to support justice, peace, and human rights within the institution, and also to the local communities they are serving. So promoting peaceful, inclusive societies by building collaboration, partnerships to develop practical solutions to help build and strengthen the communities where they are present, involving these communities in these processes, also creating communication channels through which students can report cases of racism, prejudice, discrimination, xenophobia, and any kind of human rights violation. These offices, like the establishment of a human rights office, for example, can also serve the local community. And it's also very important to have access to information and the existing accountability policies and mechanisms that needs to be effectively communicated in different languages, also to address incoming migrants and also refugee seekers, asylum seekers. As I said, anti-discrimination internal guidelines, they need to be established to prevent the situations, and diversity, inclusion, and human rights offices are also very effective instruments. And of course, creating effective arrangements for reporting of institutional performance and with participatory and transparent decision-making processes.
This is super important, and I know that there are lots of academics learning from this right now. Please make sure that in your community, the change has to happen from the micro level. So if everyone in your class is eager to share what discrimination, what challenge, what inequality they faced within anything in the institution, this is already success, because they trust the institution to address this. And trust here is very important. And I believe that Emily would like to add on this. I think that everyone would love to add on this, but let's start from Emily and then we'll go to Ramon.
Yeah, so in terms of the perspective that universities can really add value is understanding what problems are happening currently outside of the academic field and setting up your students to already be thinking in that perspective while they're learning these new methodologies, essentially, because students are empowering themselves with more information and perspectives and people who go to universities, we're hungry to learn, we want to learn, and I think most of us want to make a really big impact in the world. And so actively having that perspective while you're learning makes you a very powerful person when you're actually within the realm of working with UNICEF or working within any of these institutions, and you have these fresh ideas and these optimized ideas, and real improvements can happen very quickly when the generation of students become the workforce and they're highly educated and very aware of what's currently happening so that they can actively have those improvements on hand and be a part of the change, really.
It's very important to be the part of the change. Thank you, Emily. Ramon, to you.
Yes, I also wanted to react on Karina and Angelica, like you mentioned as well. The word leadership comes in mind, and when you want to communicate a message clearly, we need communicative leaders. And the way how would we transfer that message to a specific target audience or group in order to, let's say, focus on that topic of peace and justice. But it doesn't always come as easy as possible, right? We need to educate youngsters how to communicate them, because most of them, as I talk about it from a bottom-up perspective, don't know how to express themselves more clearly about this topic. And if we don't have that as our core value, how can we express ourselves in this way? There's no communication, there's no dialogue, and we need that kind of dialogue within the institutions to also raise our voices and also come up with better policies and regulations. So like you mentioned, it starts from the inside, but also how the outside is going to be communicated towards the inside, let's say, from an institution. So I completely agree with also the ladies here. Yes.
Excellent. And I believe that communication is a key here to hold institutions accountable, because without communication, without addressing the problem, there will be no accountability. And to you, Christiana, I know you have lots of things to share with us.
Thank you. So building up on what Emily said, I think it's very important to understand that students studying at such higher and excellent high level institutions, it's important to know that students going there are the next workforce. So speaking from a personal perspective, a personal experience, when I was attending really excellent schools, giving these kind of opportunities for students to express themselves, to have access to information, not just from the inside, but from the outside world, to know what's happening, how we can address that, where our actual place is into transferring this information further and to actually communicating what are the possible ways to achieve such a change for society. Speaking from this personal perspective, I can really say that this is the way forward, and it's very important to actually address the challenges with students and to give them access to such opportunities at such a stage, because I mean, I cannot speak for everyone, but for many of those students, they didn't probably have these kind of opportunities before entering such entities and such establishments. So building up on this progress of them during their attendance of their studies at these higher level institutions, it's very important to them to actually grasp the opportunities and build on these opportunities, so they can continue with delivering a very impactful change afterwards in their life. Being in communications with other entities or working on the development of such transparent institutions, it's all very crucial for this purpose.
It is very important what you've just mentioned, and also I just wanted to address everyone's attention to ranking systems, because when we rank university, usually it's not us who rank, not students. I mean, I'm not a student anymore, but I'm also a recent graduate, and I know that universities, they do get higher ranking if there is great research, if there is citation in place, like if they're well known. However, we need to also have the ranking methodology that includes accountability and importance of accountability in higher institutions. What do you think about this?
Well, I think we are all here very passionate about bottom-up and participatory approaches and the role, the changing role that universities have. And rankings should definitely include and measure the positive impact that universities bring to society. not only at the international or a national level, but also at the local level. It's very important that they involve the communities and that they have an eye open to the local challenges they face, and also special attention to the needs of the student community, to their profile, to what they need. Are they being heard or not? And investing in participation and communication is definitely a good investment to increase the profile of the university and at the same time bring change to society.
Brilliant, thank you very much. I believe, Ramon, you have something to add here.
Yes, thank you. So basically, indeed, if an institution is rated in the most best way, there's also more chance that if this institution is partnering up in a consortium for example, funding for a project, then there's more chance that projects get approved. And that's what we also noticed within our proposals from Erasmus+, for example, with the Armenian State University of Economics in Yerevan, because we help them with these projects, they also ask, could you rank us in the university ranking? So if you partner up with different kinds of institutions and also with different organizations, you get a much bigger, let's say, way of implementing these projects more efficiently and effectively in each local community, because each university has its own, let's say, data and indicators, what mentioned before. And with these indicators, you can actually ask for proposals for funding for doing projects. So that's more from a top-down perspective instead of a bottom-up perspective, what we, let's say, talk about now. And that's what I'm really excited about, to see more universities in these rankings, also proving that they can do these projects and also educating students in the right way. So I'm really looking forward to have more of these rankings in the best way possible for universities, definitely.
That is crucial for everyone, and the collaboration here is the key. At UniRanks, there is a new methodology, new ranking system that allows sustainable development goals be part of the ranking methodology, and allows students to review university based on their satisfaction and inclusivity, non-discrimination. This is very important. So I would like to address this to everyone on this panel. What do you think needs to be done, like practically? Let's say we see the situation where there is institution that does not promote peace, for example, does not promote equality, or if it's an individual at that institution, what should be done, first of all, by member staff, by student, and by civil society, anyone who can get involved. Let's say we are talking here about violation of SDGs. So we know this framework of SDGs, but as Karina has just said, we do not have, or maybe I'm wrong, we didn't have the exact implementation mechanism on what to do if this has been violated. So I think this is an open call for answers here. Thank you.
I'll take the first part of that. In terms of the actual punishment or the call of action that needs to happen, I'm not exactly sure what that would be, but in terms of from the perspective of the student, if that is happening at their university, there needs to be a discussion about it. It needs to be it needs to be addressed within the institution and talked about like why this doesn't work, the actual like why this rule matters and why we need to make some sort of corrective action to fix this. Because I think too often as a student, as a former student at a university, when things would happen that were scandalous within the university, it was more of a rumor, or you would hear about it through news articles externally instead of it actually being addressed within the institution. And as a student, that gives you the perspective of, is this allowed in my institution? But like they just got caught, like what is the circumstance here? So I think that being actively discussing these violations with students is really important, because then that teaches the students who are there as a sponge to say, okay, things are going to happen. Things that are not okay are going to happen within institutions or with my work or within the kind of like scope or career that I'm within. How do we address this? And this is how we deal with it, if that makes sense. Like it gives those problem solving skills kind of in real time.
Thank you very much, Emily. It's extremely important for everyone to address this once they see it. So for every student that is watching us right now, every member of staff, communication is a key, as we've discussed previously. Karina, do you think there is anything from human rights perspective and also from the perspective where we can actually, let's say, this institution or this organization doesn't have to be higher institution, but let's say it's any organization doesn't meet UN goal number 16. In fact, they do quite the opposite. What should be done?
Well, from a human rights perspective, it is crucial to establish specific offices or institutions that will follow up on accountability and human rights implementation. So if the institution itself doesn't have the power or is not willing to open this channel for reporting on human rights violations, on discrimination cases within a university environment, for example, it's up to the students to advocate for that in their student unions and create their own reporting mechanisms, and that can be brought to the management of the university, and that can be also communicated to the community that there is this kind of approach. I'm kind of transferring the research I've done with human rights offices in cities across Europe and also the Americas, and these offices, they are independent from the city hall. They are not a political office. They are formed by civil society members, by the population, by people interested in human rights implementation. And this is a forum of discussion, of reporting, of analyzing data, and that can be brought to the responsible authorities. And this is also an accountability mechanism coming from the bottom up that can be institutionalized and gain authority and visibility if the involved people are willing to bring about change. So these are instruments that are used by civil society in different contexts that can also be translated into a university context, of course, observing the institution, the possibilities. So of course we need to look specifically at each specific case. What is the local demand? What are the main violations that have been placed? And based on that diagnose, on those outcomes, can students or the civil society or involved authorities or even the management, if they have the commitment to do so, they can design their own accountability mechanism that is suited to that local specific reality. I think this is the main idea behind it, the main approach, the main methodology.
Thank you so much, Karina, for sharing this methodology, and it's very in-depth analysis here that we got. Christiana, I know that you have something to share here, and I know that you have recommendations regarding the policies for universities, how to conduct that.
Thank you. On the accountability mechanisms, I want to mention that this is something very important that many institutions need to work on. And I think that it's also a matter of importance that the actual committees and staff inside the universities, they organize, or they organize these kind of like, let's say, trainings, or even kind of like an online or in-person forums where they can actually discuss how they can make the situation better and what kind of measures they can implement inside on an institution level. So that should be a continuous way of learning through good practices, not only on the student level, but also on an institutional level inside the staff and inside the committees. So these accountable mechanisms can actually come into practice. And on what we discussed about the way of reporting, the student gaining access to actual reporting mechanisms, I think it's very important to actually also discuss the the problem in some universities that I've heard and read research on, that in some institutional, in university settings, actually the process of reporting of violent acts of violence or any kind of those acts is very bureaucratized and administrative based rather than practice based. So I think that there should also exist online forums or in-person forums in between students and the actual university committees, where this issue can be brought into existence and some recommendations can be dealt with.
Thank you so much, Christiana. You brought a very important topic here: bureaucratic procedures inside the university that prevent university from giving the voice to students immediately, and that's an issue here. So do you think that connection to media, and let's say when we have this problem in any kind of institution, when it takes a very long bureaucratic procedure to counter this, do you think this will be effective to actually refer to, let's say, fourth medium of power, media outlets, that can actually make this a big deal for the community to address this issue? Maybe Ramon?
Yes, so you brought up an interesting point, Christiana, for example, about the way education should be ruled and regulated from a staff member point of view, like a university committee. Because if there's no synergy in learning from student to committee to teacher, then this whole university can lag behind their, let's say, project and schedule, and also policies that are being implemented from the top-down perspective. Because let's not forget that part. SDGs, for example, in European perspective, is, let's say, ruled and regulated from the EU Green Deal, the EU New Green Deal in Europe. So if universities and corporates that are working with universities don't know about these policies that are coming their way, then they're lag behind. And also, at the same time, students don't know, if they think they know that the corporates know what they're doing, or universities know what they're doing, but internally, they just focus on what they need to do. So this there needs to be a synergetic way, a holistic approach on how these SDGs should be implemented the right way, and also communicated in the right way. Because this top-down, bottom-up perspective, it sounds really good and really effective, but we still are humans. We still need time. We still need to take our responsibilities, and we still have other things to do as well. We need to take time to really enhance that learning of what these SDGs actually mean in a local level, but also how it's being implemented from a top-down perspective, if that makes sense, like what Christina was saying as well.
If I can,
yes, Karina, to you.
Just add on the press media issue. I'm also a journalist, so I can bring some perspective on that. To get journalists' attention to a very specific issue within an institution, depending on the level of violation, on the level of gravity of a specific act, it perhaps won't get that attention that easily. It would have to be a massive action that would affect most of the students and also the society, somehow also the local community. So one very interesting instrument is to have inside university media project. We had newspapers in the past, but now we are talking about social media led by students, students who can be influencers in their universities and in their communities. So this is also an interesting instrument to be explored in terms of requesting and requesting for accountability from institutions.
Thank you so much, Karina. And you know, I honestly think that this framework, SDG framework for a better world, is an amazing mechanism. It's incredible template. However, we see non-democratic countries with totalitarian regimes, let's say, they and the institutions, they higher education institutions, they repeat same policy as their government has. So what can be done there? Because let's say it's I wouldn't name countries, but everyone knows what I'm thinking about right now. So let's say it's an institution in a country that is under propaganda, and where students are forced to do things that they do not want to, unless because it's a real violation. In certain places around the world, students have to go to parades and support the government in their decisions while they do not want to do it. And if they reject this, they will be expelled. This is a huge violation of human rights. However, the whole country, like the country that doesn't promote human rights, what can be done in that area? What can be done? Where should the students go? Where should the citizens go? What should they do?
Well, it's a really big question. You know, there are a lot of different dynamics that are involved within that. I think that from the external perspective, like we don't really just accepting the reality that we actually don't really have that much control in those situations, and we can only intervene to a certain degree directly in those institutions externally. But in terms of being part of like the UN or being part of these communities of education, I think that a really good idea would be to offer students who are in schools like that and in countries like that to give them priority, or to give them some sort of weighted admission into a different school, or into with different scholarship options, or an entire paying for the entire education, just to allow those students to have a ability to go to a different spot. And I know this is a really complex question, and this is even a complex answer that sounds very simple base level, but I think that that would be much more of a globalized perspective of how can we create opportunities external from that like that country that allow like those students to get educated in a different way so that they can implement the changes into their country depending on what the situation is. But yeah, I think that to be quite honest, I think we could talk about all sorts of ideas, but it would be very specific based off of which countries we're talking about and which level of censorship we're talking about.
Yeah, and also opportunities for them to exchange with students abroad in other countries who can voice their demands and voice their human rights violation situation locally. And if we're talking about very restrictive, authoritative environments, we cannot say, let's organize a protest, or let's here use social media to combat these violations. In some countries or in some contexts, the reality is very restrictive. But then I think it comes, as Emily says, the role of international students looking at the situation of other students in other countries where there are authoritative regimes, and how they can support the students who are living this kind of situation. So yeah, I think it would be a good reflection for universities in democratic countries to also think about how to establish communication channels with universities where the situation is very restrictive.
Thank you very much.
Oh, sorry, let me just add in one more
Yes,
thing.
sir.
This is kind of what I alluded to earlier, where I talked about fresh blood and new perspectives. The students who are in those environments or have been through those environments have the best perspective when it comes to this kind of question. So we can talk about it and hypothesize it all we want, but we actually never lived that. And so there are certain perspectives that we just don't have. And so it's really from the global perspective, it's our job to be able to find people who we can give the mic to, and they can kind of help offer these suggestions and implementations. And I think as lifetime learners and invested in education, that is our role as educators, is to hand the mic to the right people and to empower those people with the perspective that they have, to have the tools to actually implement these changes.
Thank you so much, Emily. Thank you very much, Karina, for your insights on this. This is a very complex topic. However, we have we have a few minutes left till this panel will finish. And my question actually is not a question, it's a recommendation from everyone here on this panel. We have experts in their fields here, people that drive communities forward. So let's start from you, Ramon. What would be your recommendation to the organizations across the world to keep up with the SDGs, implement SDG 16 in action, and be accountable?
Yes, that's a great question. I always say to my students, the best thing to have in life is an open mind. And to me, it all starts with an open mind. It all starts with an open mind on what tactics, strategies you use to implement those SDGs, but also the courage to do it in your community. To connect with people on a humane way. What are their stories? Listen to them. Listen more to people in your local communities. What can you do? And what are your own goals? Combine it with your own goals that you have and do projects with those goals. That's how I started as well in my community. I was thinking, how can I be more of value? How can I contribute to what I can do? So I think my recommendation to everything in life, and when you're young, whether you're a lobbyist, whatever you're doing, have an open mind to new perspectives with new solutions, because we are living in an ever-changing time. And it requires a dynamic mind to filter all these informations and stay curious for that. Yes, thank you.
Love that. Thank you very much, Ramon. And to you, Karina, what would you recommend in this realm?
Universality, indivisibility, non-discrimination, these are shared principles, both of the development agenda and the human rights framework. So it's very important that institutions, the academic community, establish interlinkages between the international human rights obligations, also from their national state, and the policy frameworks of the SDGs. Bring them together, because this has truly the potential to leaving no one behind or identifying those which are being left behind. And it's a powerful approach to develop effective, accountable, and transparent institutions in line with SDG 16.
Thank you so much, Karina. Very in-depth, as always, advice. And I go to Christiana. I know that you have your message to institutions globally.
Thank you. I do believe that communication is vital for any kind of activity like this. So for anyone who's out there and wants to make a change and actually wants to work towards the development of actual transparent institutions, be it whoever that is, be it a student, be it a lobbyist, be it an advocator, whoever it is, I would recommend that connecting to the right people and communicating, sharing this message whenever there is a violation or anything that's wrong is observed, communicating and actually trying to get that message further and further through the right channels and through the right people is very crucial. And also, I would say that being your own motivator when you actually observe a violation that's wrong with you is the most important thing that everybody should be doing at any point of life and in any point of practice. So I definitely think that inside motivation to actually go out there, speak your mind, communicate, and get that message out so you can achieve that change is the most important thing that everybody should be doing. And I think this is the way forward. Thank you.
Absolutely agree with you, Christiana. Communication is an essential tool to counter any problem. Thank you very much. And to you, Emily.
Yeah, I essentially am echoing the same message that my three other colleagues have been saying. Curiosity and combined with communication. Curiosity, I think, is the most fundamental aspect of education that sometimes gets undervalued. That's why we get into education, but sometimes within the educational environment and the academic environment, we get fixated on being right versus wrong, high grades, and that shifting that perspective to being more curious and to having the transparency and the teaching your students and allowing your students to teach you when methods aren't working and when methodologies, they see changes that they think should be implemented, and making a conversation about that so that there's critical thinking skills when looking at what is to see if it can be improved. And academia is the perfect environment for that. And I think that's something that isn't exactly being implemented everywhere right now.
This is absolutely critical. Thank you so much, Emily. And I would like to thank everyone on this panel. It's been a very exciting, raw, thought-provoking, and honest discussion on accountability, on UN 17 Sustainable Development Goals, in particular goal number 16. What we've heard today was truly outstanding, because we've heard from leaders in their field, people that care about UN 17 Sustainable Development Goals implementation and care about human rights. And I urge everyone who is watching us and listening to us, just make sure if you have any questions, submit them in the chat box, and we will make sure that our honorary participants will answer those questions. I know that today's discussion has generated massive interest among academics, students, visionaries, and everyone who cares about human rights. Thank you so much for your time today. It was my pleasure to interview you, and I really hope to see you again. Thank you.
Thank you so much.